welcome to LaunchLeft Podcast. I'm your host, Rain Phoenix, and today's very special guest is Alexis Taylor of Hot Chip. He'll be launching Mozart Estate. Don't forget, rate and subscribe. Follow us on all socials at LaunchLeft. Hello, Alexis Taylor, and welcome to LaunchLeft Podcast.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I know you're planning to launch Mozart Estate in a little bit here. I just had a couple questions for you before that.
Sure.
And I just wanted to share that, yesterday was a deep dive on Hot Chip. And of course, I know many of your songs, but it was fun just to have it playing in my house throughout the day. And so joyful and also in a cool way, dark, joyful, which I love, and dancey. I love electronic music, and I enjoyed very much having that as my backdrop yesterday in my home.
Oh, great.
But I also listened to your solo song that's coming out that I really, really was moved by that as well. So appreciate just your work in the world and glad that
thank you.
Glad that you're a creative doing it. And that's kind of off my first question, which was there somebody in your world as a child or even later on? Can you name one artist that really uplifted you or helped you at a time where maybe you weren't as seasoned as you are?
Well, there are so many of these artists that have been important to me. I think that Prince is the one who I've been most affected by for most of my life, from childhood onwards, just living with his music. As a kid, hearing it at home with my brother, playing each album as they came out in the mid to late 80s onwards. But I always talk about Prince, and I would say instead of him, might be more interesting to mention Stevie Wonder. I think that there's something very uplifting about his music and his spirit. And I do remember that some of firstly, one of my earliest memories is listening to Stevie Wonder when I was probably 4 or 5. He had this big hit that people find quite cheesy called "I Just Called to Say I Love You."
Yeah, I love that.
But that was very affecting to the 4-year-old, 5-year-old version of me. Also, when I was a bit older, I would play along to Stevie Wonder albums on an organ that I had at home, an organ that I'd been given by my stepdad, and it was his mum's organ. And my introduction to playing music in terms of playing, I suppose, popular music rather than classical music was to play along to Stevie Wonder records and CDs on the organ, just to improvise over the top of them. I also had piano lessons concurrently with that, but those were really, really helpful lessons, but they weren't the way in which I accessed popular music so much. It was more about learning how to read, learning about harmony, all kinds of things which I've continued to use throughout my career and throughout my life. Very valuable to me. But the playing along with other people's recorded music, with Stevie Wonder records, with Peter Gabriel records, these are the things that I suppose helped me to feel like I knew a bit about improvising and playing with other people.
Well, thank you so much for sharing about sort of the artists that really inspired you to play. And I'm curious now if there were artists, if you got to meet those heroes, any of them that you mentioned, Prince, Stevie Wonder, Peter Gabriel, and then B, if there are other artists that in your career also lifted you up in some way and helped move you forward, or offered you to meet someone important that helped get your demo.
I see.
So that as well. I like both. I usually ask both. So you answered the first one perfectly. So now I'm going to ask the second piece.
All right. Well, I met Peter Gabriel. I didn't meet Prince or Stevie Wonder ever. I met Peter Gabriel with Hot Chip. We got to work with him in his writing studio at Real World Studios, which is his own studio in Box in the UK. That was a very amazing moment, really. I'd grown up hearing his albums from the album So onwards.
Me
and
too.
The album after So, called Us, came out in 1992, and I bought that when it came out. And the first or second concert I ever went to was Peter Gabriel with my dad. And I listened to that album a lot as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old and onwards. Then the song on there called Come Talk to Me with Sinead O'Connor, I remember being quite inspired by that song and the sentiment of it when I made the Hot Chip song Ready for the Floor, which is about communication and about trying to talk to somebody and break through a kind of invisible barrier that's there, which is very much what the Peter Gabriel song is about. It wasn't really written in order to reference that, but I just had it somewhere inside of me as a song that I loved. Then working with him, we only had one day in the studio, and it was really fantastic. We were asked by Richard Russell, the producer who runs XL Recordings, if we would get together with Peter Gabriel to cover a song by Vampire Weekend called Cape Cod Kwassa Kwassa. The Vampire Weekend song refers to Peter Gabriel by name in the song. And so Peter then had to sing about himself in the cover version. Hot Chip were asked to make the music and Peter Gabriel do the vocal. And we did that together on the spot at Peter Gabriel's studio. So we kind of came up with our arrangement, and he played and sang, and he found it too surreal and odd to have to sing his own name. So he talked about, he changed the lyrics to make it be about it being strange to sing your own name. But yeah, his voice was fantastic, and he was so nice, and it was pretty much, at that point in my life, one of the most amazing experiences to be in the room with and making music with an idol of mine who I'd grown up listening to so much. Then in terms of, you were asking, is there somebody who's helped me and lifted me up in some way? Well, I'd say early on, we'd already released one album, Coming On Strong, but I was in New York. I had a girlfriend at the time who was studying at the Cooper Union doing architecture. And in the same building where she was studying, there was a talk organized by, there was a talk featuring these producers, Trevor Jackson, James Murphy from DFA, LCD, Hank Shockley from Public Enemy, and Carl Craig.
Wow.
And I went to that talk, and when I was waiting outside to go in, somebody spoke to me because they recognized the Hot Chip badge I was wearing. And I was wearing that on the tongue of my trainers, on my sneakers. And this guy, Jonathan Galkin, who happened to run the DFA record label, said, how do you have this Hot Chip badge? And I said, well, it's my band. And he had heard Hot Chip and wanted to potentially sign us to the label. So he introduced me to Tim Goldsworthy and James Murphy from that record label, DFA. And those two, I would say, really helped. In terms of advice, I remember being at this point in my life where Hot Chip were fairly new to the industry still. James Murphy sat on a tour bus with me, giving me quite a lot of helpful advice and listening to some situations I found myself in that were challenging. Slight kind of crises of confidence or knowing about which direction to go in, signing with a major label versus staying independent, all these kind of things. So I got good advice from James, and also James has a very good sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's
that
fun.
really was helpful. So he and then Tim Goldsworthy, who was his UK counterpart, who many years later I reconnected with and helped produce an album of mine, a solo album. So both of them I would talk about as helping me quite a lot and helping Hot Chip.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think, not enough mention is made of the creative force of the people behind the scenes for musicians and artists that lift up and support them, and their industry people, right? Like, which sometimes gets that bad rap of like the industry versus the artist, but that there's a symbiosis. There's a combining of creative forces. Some are better at other things than producing songs. They can produce an artist and really
Yeah,
help mold an artist. So I always see it as like everyone is a facet of helping lift up an artist, right? There's different people for different things. And I don't know if you're the same, but I know a lot of artists who can only make music or only paint. They don't know the other stuff very well, and it's very debilitating in the current climate where you're supposed to kind of like come up with your own social media and be like out there and be, do all of it. And so I always do appreciate when I think about those people behind the scenes or producer or label or who can help hold an artist and say, here's the thing you can do and we'll help you do it, and you don't have to do the stuff you can't do, and just having that advice. And they're usually music lovers. Every label person I know or manager loves music. That's why they're doing it.
Yeah. That's absolutely right, what you point out there. Not every artist can do all of those things or even expects to know how to do those additional things. Often people I don't really like to generalize, but sometimes people are caught up in their heads and their creative ideas, and they're good at making music. Even within that, they may find challenges of how to continue and how to feel motivated at times. But they may be able to do all of that, but not as you say, the other stuff. There've been lots of people that have been helpful to me over the years. I feel like I've been surrounded by some very supportive individuals and teams and tour managers and other musicians. And I mainly connect with other musicians, but I also connect with people working in different mediums. So there are a couple of artists, as in visual artists, who I talk to a lot about my creative process and about their creative processes, and have very great conversations with them that are inspiring, or look at their work and talk to them about that. And that's just as important to me as talking to people making music or people in the music industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's all connected in that, the creative process. It's infinitely interesting because everybody approaches it coming from different places. You might meet someone who's very similar to your way of being creative, but often I meet people who are quite different.
I've got Lawrence from Mozart Estate calling in.
Let's launch Lawrence. Great. Welcome to the show, Lawrence from Mozart Estate. We're so glad to have you here.
Hey. Hi, America. I hope you didn't hear any of the preamble that had just happened. But yeah, I'm using ancient equipment back in London. I'm not on the fiber optic line yet.
I have to say it's rather charming that you don't have a laptop or smartphone, and that we're landline talking right now. I love it. Well, you're on right now with Alexis Taylor, as you know, and he's chosen you to talk about your work and ask you a couple questions. And I'm curious, even ahead of asking Alexis for a question for you, is just how the two of you met.
Okay. Who do you want to answer that? Lawrence?
I'm gonna ask Lawrence first, and then hopefully you'll come up with a totally different answer, Alexis. Okay, here we go.
Wow, I don't know, because we met at various gigs and events in London. So I can't remember the first one. I mean, the last time we met up was at Glastonbury last year. We were both, my band was playing 2 shows at Glastonbury, and Alexis was DJing, I think, or maybe even up to a set in one of the tents, which was far away from where we were playing. So we were kind of at different ends of the festival, but we met up at a place called Crow's Nest in Glastonbury. So that was the last time. First time, wow, can't remember. It was a long time ago. Yeah.
All right. Is that how you remember it, Alexis?
That's absolutely accurate. Yeah. So I think the first time I met Lawrence, he wouldn't necessarily have known who I was, but I was on the street on Bethnal Green Road, and I was with John Coxon, a musician from Spiritualized, who I know and who Lawrence knows. And Lawrence had just come back from maybe doing, it might have been Arena On Plus magazine photo shoot. And I just stood in the street with John Coxon, and we just had a little chat about how that photo shoot had gone. But he wouldn't necessarily have known I'm in a band or who Hot Chip were or anything. And then we've just met at various gigs over the years, things that Lawrence has performed at, or a mutual friend of ours, Ian Svenonius from The Makeup.
Yeah, he's a friend. I know him.
Yeah, some of those gigs, maybe Lawrence has been in the audience, or there's all kinds of gigs where we're both there in London. And we have another mutual friend called Douglas Hart from the Jesus and Mary chain.
Yeah. Lawrence, were you able to hear any of that?
Yeah. It cut in halfway through. So yes, I've got it. I can hear Alexis now. And yeah, that's amazing, because I'd forgotten about that big shoot. I did a big photo shoot for Irina Holm, and yeah, I'd forgotten that I'd met Alexis with John Coxon. That was like the first front cover that I'd done in the UK, which people who know South America probably think that's crazy, but yeah, we never got onto the cover of The Enemy or any of the music papers. So it wasn't till recently that I actually got a front cover. So yeah, we met at that shoot, I suppose. Yeah, fantastic, good memory.
So are you guys mates? Would you consider that you're friends and you hang out often, or have you just been admirers of each other's music and spent?
We don't.
Yeah, go on.
We don't know each other that well. I would happily hang out with Lawrence more if I saw him, but we don't. I only got his phone number yesterday.
Oh, cool.
I'm a fan of Lawrence's music more than we know each other well.
Wonderful,
but we bump into each other at gigs, and I don't even know if Lawrence has heard, I don't know what his opinion is of my band's music, or if he's even heard it. So it's not like that's my honest answer.
Cool. I love that. So it's almost like this has prompted you both to be on a call together. You wouldn't normally just call each other up.
Well, I think as I'm gaining more prominence, we are sort of meeting at different things, and we're kind of part of the same scene. And I just remembered something actually, because a studio that I work at was playing Hot Chip stuff that he was working on, because there's an engineer called Shooter that we both work with, Japanese guy. And one day in the studio, he told me he'd been working with Hot Chip people, and so we sat and listened to stuff. So I am aware of his music, absolutely, yeah. And we're all fans in London.
I'd forgotten about that connection. Yeah, Shooter Shinoda has recorded loads of my solo music and some Hot Chip stuff, and that, every time I would ask Shooter what he'd been up to at the studio, he'd often say, well, I've been working with Lawrence on a new record, and that was over a period of years. And I guess that record is the latest record, the one that I wanted to I wanted to launch Mozart Estate, but it's specifically that record that I'm most excited about and that I've been listening to. I think it's the best record to come out last year, and probably in the last 10 years or so. It's my favorite record by anyone recently.
High praise from Alexis Taylor. Wow, that was beautiful.
That's really sweet, yeah. And that is the record that came out. We were working on it for years because we were doing it without a budget. And it did actually come out last January, yeah. And this is the one that we worked on with this guy, this mutual engineer that we both use. I think Hot Chip, when they do the solo projects and work with this guy, mostly.
That's right. Yeah.
This guy that I know. So I am aware, and I'm sure that as we're on the, we start promoting all the things that are happening, we'll bump into each other more. But we're kind of like on the same scene, but I think me and Alexis, we don't sort of go out every night. That's probably the thing, we're not out every night partying. So that's the reason we don't bump into each other that much. But when there's something amazing going on, like say, for example, Ian Svenonius is in town, and everybody goes.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah.
Ian's lovely. And I noticed that the makeup is even reforming for a few shows. And I know Escapism was there. Yeah. We've played a bunch of shows with him here. I have a band here in Los Angeles, and he lives here too. So, he and Sandy have the band Escapism. And so we've played with them. Yeah, they're great. He's just lovely, really. I love that we all know Ian. Shout out to Ian.
I remember the first time I heard Felt, which was Lawrence's first band. I was in Philadelphia, and I was with a friend called William Pym, who used to live there. And late at night after a Hot Chip gig, he played me an old Felt record from probably 1985 or so. And I remember thinking how brilliant it was, but also how strange it was that it had a guitar solo and a drum pattern in it that Noel Gallagher from Oasis had kind of stolen wholesale for this massive song of theirs called Don't Look Back in Anger, which by comparison with Felt is, just a terrible, terrible piece of music, but massively successful. And I found it strange to think that there was this imprint on Noel Gallagher from this Felt record, unless it's just coincidence, but it can't really be coincidence. I think it's, the same record label creation. There's a link there. So that was the first time I heard any of Lawrence's music. And then I also used to live on Whitecross Street in London, which is near where you live, I think, Lawrence. And my friend Nick is the biggest Felt fan in the world, and he also lived in that same area for a while, and he would often see Lawrence in the local supermarket. So there are various links before we ever met in person. And also when I first met my wife, Kerry, she had a CD album of one of the Go-Kart Mozart albums. So there was lots of things leading me towards the point at which I eventually got this latest Mozart Estate record. I'd always been a fan of each thing I'd heard, but I'd never gone in deep like some people do. And then it was that latest Mozart Estate album. Actually, Ian Svenonius posted an Instagram story where he was listening and dancing to a song, maybe in his house with a friend, Matt Fishbeck. And I had to text Ian and say, what is that music playing in the background that you're dancing to? And it was a different Go-Kart Mozart song, a previous alias of Lawrence's. It was a song called The Sun. So that was the album before this latest one. So that was really where I got most excited about the music. And I bought that record, one of the most expensive records I bought, because it's quite hard to find on vinyl. So there's lots leading to this point.
So cool.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah, I just heard that Alexis lived on Whitecross Street.
Yeah, I used to. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, he's saying yeah.
Because,
I used to live.
Yeah, I didn't know that at all. That's quite. I live on this street, Whitecross Street, in London, and the guy probably saw me hanging out at the cafe, because I hang outside this cafe. Sort of, it's kind of like my office. That's where I come and do everything. So his friend probably saw me hanging out there. And I didn't know that Alexis actually lived on Whitecross Street.
So
that's amazing.
Lawrence, if you can hear me, I lived on Whitecross Street when it still had a record shop on the road, and it had a kind of market, like a secondhand and new goods market. It was before it had been kind of gentrified. It was probably 1999 or so that I lived there.
Do you think that you would ever do anything else but music?
Well, I don't think I would be as good at doing anything else. I think I've made my focus music and songwriting and production, and I feel a little bit like, whilst I studied English at university and I'm quite interested in writing, I haven't really done that in earnest for a very long time. But that's just about the only other thing I could imagine doing, is trying to write some essays or write some thoughts down in a way that it could become poetry or something else more literary. But I don't know that I'd be so good at that, because I feel like my energies are all about understanding popular music. And although Hot Chip is quite different from Mozart Estate, I do think that Lawrence and I share an interest in the immediacy of pop music and what you can say within that format. That's something that I was really noticing about the latest Mozart Estate record when I was listening again in the last few days. You know, now everyone listens to music through a smartphone speaker. Those songs of Lawrence's really come through well, even on that format, in the same way that 60s and 50s and 70s pop music did, and 80s. So what I mean by that is, obviously those records didn't come through a smartphone speaker, but they came across well through a 7-inch single or through a radio, and their immediacy was just as vital to them as was the complexity in the lyrics or the music. So I think Lawrence is channeling something about the kind of classic era of pop music and doing something inventive and new with it, and saying something very affecting and very political in this latest record in a way that no one else is really saying. So whilst I'm maybe less overtly political, I can see some similarity in terms of not giving up on the idea of the pop song format and trying to use that to express yourself.
Beautiful. Do you have any response to that?
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think absolutely interested in the pop song as a medium for connecting with people in of all sorts of people straight away. And I won't give up on that either. And I always think it's going to be relevant, that kind of like pop music. And yeah, I kind of even turn my back on instrumental music, because I just want to focus totally on a 3-minute pop song that millions of people can hear. I mean, that's the reason I do it. It's frustrating at the moment because it's in an independent world where only a few thousand people hear it. So the aim is for it to be, heard millions and millions of times, and to connect with right about today, right about what's going on today. But as a job, I think it's possible that I may have to do another job, because to make money from music is becoming harder and harder. And I may end up sweeping streets or something terrible like that, because that's the only thing I'm qualified for, is a job at the very bottom of the ladder, really. I mean, when I used to work, I'd work in a warehouse or something like that. I was a factotum. That was my job. So it's very possible that I may have to go back to that, which would be disaster for me. But it is. It's not certain that I can carry on making music. I mean, I hope to, and I really want to, and I'll fight, until the end for it. But yeah, very tough days here in the UK at the moment. And I think a lot of bands are part-time, really.
Yeah.
They have to work as well. Yeah, so it is. It's a lot tougher than it used to be in the 80s when Belt first began.
It's like that here too. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's a big reason why I do LaunchLeft. It's sort of to remind myself that it's possible from other artists to get lifted up or introduced to right people, and to try to cultivate a space where kindness exists over competition in the industry, so that people help lift each other up, because it just makes the music scene better. It just makes it better.
I feel that a lot. I feel, for me personally, my crusade has sort of been like, if I make it big, I kind of always wonder when a band who I really like and they say who their influences are, they say, I really love this person, they haven't sold any record, and then they get famous themselves, and then they don't cover that band's music. They don't do a cover version to get the person that they love some money. Do you know what I mean? I think like you say, the kindness is missing, and we should all, if we get famous, cover one of the people who we love, cover their song, so that we're all sharing in it. We're all sharing together.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. What a wonderful.
For me, my main the main way I can illustrate that is very simple. It's the band Coldplay. Do you know this band Coldplay?
Yeah.
They're very big, and they kind of they took the it sounds like Echo and the Bunnymen to me, the early days of that band, and they would talk about Echo and the Bunnymen in all the interviews. I think they even did interviews together, and for me it was always, why doesn't he cover one of Echo and the Bunnymen songs and help get them some big money?
Wow. I mean, I just love that, because the simplicity of that idea. It's actually a conversation I had recently with somebody who's on the management side, talking about like doing, us doing some kind of cover record, like having different bands do covers. But to hear it, I love the sort of reverse idea, because often it's the other way around. Like somebody smaller artist is doing their heroes, is covering one of their hero songs, as opposed to someone who's gotten big and famous is covering a lesser known or, legacy act that hasn't had a record out in a while. And that's such a beautiful flip on the idea. It would bring so much more visibility and things.
Quite a nice example of somebody doing that. I mean, you could say it's a bit late in the day for him to be doing it, but when Bruce Springsteen covered Suicide, Dream Baby Dream, I thought that was a really good thing, because as a fan of both of those artists, I'd grown up listening to Bruce Springsteen's album Nebraska a lot, and I had never realized that when he's doing the song State Trooper, he's actually kind of imitating the high whoops and the screaming that you get Alan Vega doing on the Suicide records. Bruce Springsteen had heard Suicide, and he'd actually, at the time, he'd argued for them to be signed to a record label, and he'd stood up for them in a meeting when everyone else had not been a fan. So he'd obviously championed them from the beginning, but many, many years later, he was covering them in the late 90s. And people were a bit surprised to hear Bruce Springsteen covering Suicide. But, he was doing that thing that you're talking about in a way there, Lawrence. But as well as him doing that, shining a light on them, it also made me make sense of that record of his and how, in his own strange way, he was trying to do something like Suicide, but it came out completely different because he was playing an acoustic guitar rather than using electronics. But yeah, there is a link really there between Nebraska and that first Suicide record.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I think that is beautiful. That is one example of someone who has done this thing that we're talking about, where this kind of payback thing, this kind of nurturing and looking after. I think it should happen a lot more.
Yeah, and it has. I mean, we can cite people throughout time who've done that, but the idea of for me, the idea was just create a space that's like intentionally about that. Because then it offers a space for artists to do it very intentionally. Like, think about, like, who do I think is great that I want to. And so I think there are incredible artists who are examples of constantly doing that. Some of them make record labels and have these artists be on their labels, and so it's not a new idea. It's more the idea of the intentional space to just do that. Like, that's what we do. And also because somehow, because anything that becomes industry, right? Anything that becomes money making, and art falls into that category, you can lose centering the actual truth of art, which is a creative force that we can't even explain why we do it. And I don't know if any artist can. It comes from some place. It's impossible not to. Like you said, you'll do it even if you have to work a day job. I know you'll come back and still make songs, right? So all of it's a passion that we have, but when it gets it can get corrupted in the industry side of it. And then we can lose sight as artists even of how powerful it is to come back to that transformative part of art and share it with our fellow artists and even people behind the scenes, the record labels, the managers. Bring back the heart space of the creative, which transforms everyone. Like, who do you know that isn't listening to music to help them through a hard time or make them feel happy? Or who is not watching a film that totally helped tell their story or triggered a trauma that they then went to therapy because the film helped them see that they were hiding from? Like, every art form, when you think about it, is this incredible opportunity to connect to our source, like who we are, why we're here. And so the artist is such an important part of humanity, and always has been around the campfire since we were, early man. But when commerce enters into it and is centered over that, we forget to share it with our fellow artists. We forget to center that. And it's so cool when we do. And you're an example of that, Alexis. And so are you, Lawrence, because even hearing you both talk about each other and your music and how you met, you can feel that you're resonating in that center that remembers, like, this is really what it's about. It's not about one-upping or, just being being scared someone's gonna get your job or get that, that big stage and you're not. I mean, it turns into that because commerce with art always corrupts. But I truly think we can turn that around just by behaving the way we're behaving, just by centering the truth of art, right? And maybe I know I sound a bit woo-woo, but these are the things I think about and that make me feel happy to be an artist when I'm not getting anywhere with it sometimes, right? Like, in a commerce way, I remember I'm not doing it really for that. I can't stop. This is what I do. This is, I don't need it to live there all the time, and I can still feel the richness of what it's done for me and the people that it does touch.
So, that's good to hear it phrased like that. I mean, I have been quite lucky in terms of not spending my career worrying about competitiveness with other people, or I've been very fortunate that the band that I've launched has had a bit of commercial success that's allowed me to pursue music and keep going doing that. That may not last forever, but it's a pretty luxurious place to be, that you're able to make music and people listen to it. At the same time as that's what's going on with Hot Chip. At the same time as that, I release lots of other music that goes under the radar a bit more and that isn't so well known, and I play venues that are small and people don't always, turn up to them and so on. And I don't find it easy with some of the other projects I do to sell tickets or to sell records. And that's not somebody complaining. That's me just explaining that there are two different things going on, and both of them mean a lot to me, both of these parts of my life. And so I can really relate to what Lawrence was talking about earlier of it being very, very hard. I don't mean that to say I'm in exactly the same position. I'm in this position where I'm lucky that I've able to make music and play to audiences with Hot Chip, and that's fantastic. And I never take that for granted. But I really feel for people who are trying to make ends meet through music, and we're now in a situation where there isn't so much money coming in through streaming or through anything. So yeah, it's very hard for people in your situation, Lawrence, where you're saying it's not easy to keep going. It's also difficult for people just starting who are right at the beginnings of their careers, and what hope do they have when it's so expensive to tour? And in the UK, Brexit came in and has made it very hard to go affordably into Europe and so on. And there's loads of things that are tricky, but as you say, it's good if we can, as the point of this podcast, makes clear, it's good if we can help shine a light on other people, or lift or launch people, or, as Lawrence was suggesting, cover people and get that music heard, and maybe get some revenue for people who are not so well known but who have been an influence on others. So yeah, there's a lot to kind of think about there.
Yeah.
Then when you do a solo project, it's not so well attended, whatever, that kind of thing. Yeah. Touring is, it's so, I mean, we can't really tour properly because it's just too expensive to tour. So what we're doing is trying to build it up to a level where we get 500 people coming to each gig. If we get 500 people, then we can start making money. And it's as simple as that. It's a very small amount of people, but it's really hard for bands to reach that level where you get 500 each evening, each time you play. Then you can make it work. And you can roll on, and you can go to Europe, because Europe's really expensive to tour. I mean, we've had some offers to support bands, and we have to really think, can we do it? We don't even know if we can do it, because it's too expensive to actually go on a big tour, which would be great for us, which would get us to the people we want to get to, the new audience. We're not even sure if we're able to do it. So we have great offers, but then we're not even sure if we can do them. So it's such a dilemma.
I mean, that was something I recently experienced, and I was asked to open for the band Pulp with my solo music, and I managed to do it in Amsterdam, but it lost money doing the show. It wasn't something where I even broke even doing it, and that was just with three of us and no tour manager. No, so I suppose the difficulty is not to just focus on the negative, but the practical things that are different now from what they were 20 years ago is a label was in some way like a patron for a band. And maybe they would offer tour support, and that label would do that because they could see it as an investment, and the band would go on tour, they would play in America or wherever it is, or they would open for another band, and the investment would eventually pay off for the record label, hopefully, if the label was lucky. But now labels like artists see that as too risky, because they are in some cases earning less than they used to. Quite often the case. So they no longer see any way that they could pour their money in up front. I'm not defending labels. I'm just saying that's often the model, that they kind of now want a band to be self-sufficient, and to do everything it can to build up a following and have enough people ready to buy the tickets, and then the label will get involved. So thinking from a practical perspective about what you're describing, Lawrence, as a fan, I would be so disappointed if you can't continue to make records. I can understand why you're talking in those terms, because how do you make it work? But I suppose what you need is one label or one manager or somebody who steps in, who does believe in it enough to be able to put in a bit of funding so that these things can happen and the music doesn't just disappear. Because the making of the records is expensive and they're going on tour is expensive. And of course, I'm realistic. Not every single band in the world is going to break through and get this financial support and success. But if there are people out there who can help you, that's what you want, really, isn't it? For people to kind of do what they can as a way of keeping music going. And I suppose we're talking in terms of how it is in the UK. A musician I know a little bit mentioned to me that in France, there's quite a different way of getting funding for bands and for arts. And so maybe that's something that is a bit more practical that we could be asking, the government to think about, to bring in some kind of funding and schemes for the arts and for music in a way that there is in other countries. I don't know the specifics of that. I just know this musician was talking about how different it was for his French colleague and how they can afford to tour because they get these grants and it pays for their tours,
Yeah, that sounds like the difference between the US and Canada. In Canada, you get, I was speaking to US Girls, Meg from US Girls, and they gave, tour support, it's things to make videos, money, funding. In Canada, it's actually like what you're describing France is like, and it sounds like the UK is like the US, which is like, we're not giving you anything. And I relate a lot to what you said, Lawrence, because I'm currently doing that where I'm just playing, we're just building audience in Los Angeles because it's not cost effective to tour. It's like, even if we were to we know we would go in the hole if we were to get an opening thing. And the only way we would probably do that is local, so we could come home every night and sleep, like local enough, like a small California tour or something. But I think what you're doing, it actually affirmed the strategy I'm currently trying for too, which is stay home, don't play too often, but try to build the audience to 300 to 500 people that will always show up. And that's, once you get there, it's inevitable that there'll be some help. But also, I agree with what you just shared, Alexis, about just one person. All an artist needs is one person who, doesn't need the money. Ideally, they're a patron of the arts, but they also love to work with artists because then they can support themselves. They're not looking for a cash payout. They're more looking to build a career for an artist, or people, willing to take that risk and then find a patron of the arts. Because I'm a huge proponent of wishing to see that more. There are people with so much money, like insane amounts of money, that could uplift the whole art community very easily, like fairy wand, just tour support and mastering, money for mastering, money for rehearsal spaces. It's not even that crazy when you think about it, but creating like a fund for that. And I think you're right though. The idea that seems to be the most prevalent one is an artist needs to get so far along on their own, sometimes on no money, before anyone in the industry will take notice. It's like a very long, the curve is longer than it used to be. There's no developing artists anymore, Yeah.
I think the great thing is, though, about music, the beauty of music and the, music business is that there's no rules, there's no golden rules at all, and you can carry on. You can get to the age of 17 and suddenly you're famous. And I love that aspect of the business. I love it that there's no set rules that you have to abide by. And, it's like, it is like the kind of lottery ticket. and your ticket can come in any time, and you never know when that's going to be. And I love that aspect of it. It's it's a dangerous business. It's not cut and dried. You don't know whether you're going to make the bills. You don't know whether you're going to make the rent, and I love that side of it. And all you need is belief in yourself, and that will pull you through.
Oh, what a beautiful way to possibly end this conversation.
Yeah.
Wow. How that, thank you for that. And that is so true. I really appreciate that there was a lot of positivity in this conversation, even while pointing out some of the more difficult facets to being a musician today. There was a hopeful thread that was throughout, and that is so beautiful what you just said, Lawrence, and I couldn't agree with you more. Believing in yourself and doing what you believe in. If it's music, do that. There's really no substitute for that. You'll have a life well lived, even if you die a pauper. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not the point, right? Like, that's like, I always try to remember that. If I lived the life I believed in, it's really not about money. It would be lovely to be comfortable, of course. Like, yes, bring it on. But when you live when you believe in yourself and you believe in what you do, how wonderful of a life. That's like you're on your deathbed, you're not regretting a lot.
Yeah. I think that's what can keep artists going, is that they're driven by something that they believe in. They don't necessarily always know why it is they have this impulse, but it's there. But I guess the difficulty is when people lose that ability to focus on that and put that first, because practical things get in the way of it. So it's something you want. It's great to hear Lawrence saying, don't ever lose that. And I think that is the most important thing. But you also do need a little bit of feedback that tells you you're recognized in some way to help you keep going. I don't think you need that exclusively. You can be driven by your own impulses alone. That's as I look out at a landscape of what does it really mean to release a record? Who will hear it? Will anyone care? I have those thoughts a lot. The music itself and the creative impulse and the living of life, being alive and interacting and thinking about things and thinking about music, those are the things that keep it going. But at the same time, if you're doing it all in a vacuum, it does get hard sometimes, I think. I've managed to make it sound negative where Lawrence had just ended on a positive. So I don't mean that at all.
I hear you. I think what you're sharing about is community, like that that artists need community, even if they are, it's not fun to do it in a vacuum. It isn't. It is fun to know that people are out there, even if it's 25 that are passionate about what you're doing and listening,
Yeah.
So
if you get one person's feedback that they've connected with what you're doing and it meant something to them, and maybe often if anyone does connect with somebody's music, they do explain the effect it's had on them, and that can be the most rewarding thing about releasing music. There's one thing that's rewarding about making the music. I find the role of coming up with a song very enjoyable, and I like the challenge of that, and I like the way it makes me feel as I'm in the process of making the music. But the reaction from people, whether they've understood it in the way that you intended or totally differently, or whether people just tell you that it's affected them in some way. And that still happens with things that I've released, which have had very, very few numbers of plays or streams or have not sold, in vast quantities. And it happens with things that are on a bigger scale. And I think the same goes for the music Lawrence is making. The last time I saw Mozart Estate play, the room was packed. It was a London show at the Dome in Tufnell Park. It was totally packed and sold out, and everybody in the room was singing along, and everybody was enjoying the fact that this was such brilliant, original pop music that they could really connect with emotionally and in terms of the the statements Lawrence is making about people living in, you know, the choruses of his pop songs. I know you're there, Lawrence, so you can hear me, but the choruses of these pop songs about living in relative poverty and living on £10 a day, they're turned into anthemic choruses by a group of people who are kind of buoyed up by that lyrical content and shining a light on that. And there's also some humor in the music too, despite some quite sort of, you know, serious, dark subject matters being explored. But to be collectively with all those people enjoying that music was one of the greatest experiences of gigs I've gone to recently. And also, it really reminded me, even though it's musically very different, it reminded me of how I felt watching Royal Trucks years and years ago in the late 90s. It was like, this is this music that's not really for everyone, but the people who are here are connecting with some quite individual ideas coming across from an original artist on stage. There was something about it that put me in mind of that music and how kind of original both Royal Trucks and Mozart Estate are, and just how special it is to be on the ride with these people in the room, you know, enjoying it with the audience. So that felt amazing to hear that.
Oh, cheers. I heard all that. That's brilliant. You're coming through now. I can hear you. That was, a great experience, that gig. I remember that gig. And it was a joy to experience that. Because I used to think when we played the South, there wasn't any response. I used to think, it must be great when the audience sings back at you. And it's something that I've only recently experienced. And it is such a joy when you connect with a song. And especially if you're thinking about depression. I think everybody's singing back at you about being depressed. It's a great feeling, really. And they're not just sort of singing back some inane comment. They're like, it's hard to explain, but it's great because you've kind of done your job, really. That's what you wanted and succeeded. So for me, it's it's a real joy to experience that later in life, because it's something we didn't experience. It felt we played many gigs, and we didn't really know if anybody liked us or not. You couldn't really tell. There was a muted reaction. So now when it happens, when everybody gets together and sings the songs, it's a real validation of what you've done, really, and that's great.
Yeah, that must feel incredible. And I'm so excited now to do a deep dive on your band. Like, I hadn't gotten a chance to listen to your music. I was telling Alexis I was on a hot chip craze yesterday. I just played that all day and I didn't get a chance. So now this is exciting. Now I get to check out your music and I love this conversation. Hold on, let me put this up so he can hear you. Go ahead.
Can I just ask Lawrence a question quickly? If you were recommending a starting point, a kind of overview of your own career to Rain and to anyone listening, like which records of yours, going further back, as you know, as well as what you've just released, which are the ones that you still relate to from the back catalogue, or what would you kind of say are things to start with or listen to? I mean, I've listened a lot to them, but I know that other people haven't.
If you're going to check me out, I would say go for the Strange Idols Pattern the Felt album, which is album number 3, produced by John Leckie. That's called the Strange Idols Pattern. That's the one for Felt. And then Back in Denim was a big album. And that's the album when we got a proper budget and we made a big record. And I love On the Hot Dog Streets. I think that's a great record. So I'd start with those 3 if I was just beginning to get into it.
Okay.
Yeah. I love On the Hot Dog Streets as well.
I think those 3 would be a good primer.
Perfect. Yeah. Any other questions for each other before we step away from this insightful conversation with two very amazing artists?
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
I've got just one other quite broad question, which is, would you say, Lawrence, that there was a change in your approach to writing and music making that made your music, I feel like in very crude terms, it seems more pop and more kind of pop and sort of outward looking now than maybe it did in the earlier days, which isn't always the way that a musician's career trajectory goes.
Yeah.
It can be that things get more insular, but would you agree with that at all? And if so, was there any change in terms of your ideas about how to present your music?
What happened was before I was in a band, I wanted to write the kind of, I loved all sorts of music, but I wanted to write a social comment sort of song, which was like a kind of punk song, if you like. When I was beginning to play music, the punk rock thing was happening, and I loved a social commentary in the punk rock. And I couldn't do it. It's impossible. I didn't know why I couldn't do it. I tried, and I would never write. I would write a more poetic song, and I found that a lot easier. So I've been striving all these years to write social commentary, and I think I've learned how to do it now. It's taken a long time, and I think out of desperation, I don't know how it happened, but I just think it's out of a sort of desperation to break through. I somehow found the voice that I've been looking for since I was 17, to write these kind of songs that connect with people. So it was, that's the only way I can describe it, really. It was kind of, I wanted to write a social commentary song. I couldn't. And then out of the desperation, I kind of found it somehow through a lot of hard times. I kind of found a voice. It's the only way I can describe it, really. And the punk songs that I'm talking about are things like, there's a band called Alternative TV, and they made some really great early singles, and of course Donny Rotten, people like that.
Yeah.
I could never write a song as direct as that, and that's what I've been trying to do. And then, I reckon just through the whole desperation and collapse and hard times, found my way through to being able to write these kind of songs that I've always wanted to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, and it's really interesting to hear about that process of trying to find that particular voice that you first thought you wanted to use but wasn't really coming naturally.
So wonderful to talk to both of you on the show. I want to hear just if you can both share what's coming up for you, because this episode is coming out pretty soon, in like a month or less. So if there's anything coming up in the next month that you want to share, and of course we'll put your links in the we'll have all your information for our audience to digest. But if there's anything you kind of wanted to share before we say goodbye.
Yeah, I have a new collaboration with Mike Simonetti where we've covered, speaking of covers and shining a light on other people's music, we've covered a song by Will Oldham, Bonnie Prince Billy, called I See a Darkness. And it's a kind of electronic, housey production version of that song. And on the B-side is an unreleased Bruce Springsteen song, Fade to Black, that we've covered. So that's the next thing for me, but that's not been announced yet. But I'm sure it's okay to say that it's coming soon. And other than that, I'm just working on another solo record and some more music with Hot Chip.
Great. Lawrence, would you?
Mate. Well, I look forward to that single. That sounds amazing. So I look forward to that. And for me, we've got a book coming out on Bonaire, which is a big publishing company, in September, and that's like, it's called A Year with Lawrence, and it's a journalist followed me around last year for a whole year. I mean, not every day, but for a bit, for when we were working. And he's wrote a book on what happened during this busy year that we had last year when the album came out in January and we played Glastonbury. So he's writing about that year, and throughout those things we did, he's putting in the backstory of, you know, how we got to that year. So it's not a biography, it's not a memoir, but you find out about me through this year in the spotlight, and that's called Street Level Superstar, The Year with Lawrence.
Very cool. Oh, exciting! Wonderful.
Yeah, he's a great writer, Will Hodgkinson. I'm looking forward to that book, Lawrence.
Me too. Well, I really appreciate both your time and insights, and that you shared so much as mutual artists in the music field, and that there is this incredible and palpable kindness that is shared between you. I think I appreciate the example in the world of doing that. So thank you for sharing your time and each other's.
Thank you for having this on the program.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's great to be asked to do this about somebody else's music that you like.
I've got a shark's fin on my back, always ready to attack. Ample poised to rally boys, we're a violent pack.
You've got
peanuts in your pocket to feed, vanilla gorilla. You've got peanuts in your pocket to feed, vanilla gorilla. I got a feeling that feelings are gonna go out of style. Yeah, and I got quite a hunch that they're not coming back for a while. Peanuts in your pocket to feed, vanilla gorilla. You've got peanuts in your pocket to feed, vanilla gorilla. Well, I'm the kind of guy that'll never grow old. Yeah, even when I lost my teeth and my head is bald. Peanuts in your pocket to feed, vanilla gorilla. You've got peanuts in your pocket to feed, vanilla gorilla. I'm gonna tell you something about yourself that you never heard before. I'm got a pistol with the monkey grip and slip that they cannot afford. I'm pessimistic, but who's gonna scratch it when there's nothing? 1, 2, 3, 4. Peanuts in your pocket to feed, vanilla gorilla. I can't arrest you just because I detest you. I can't lock you up in a prison cell.
You've got
peanuts in your pocket to feed, vanilla gorilla. You've got peanuts in your pocket to feed, vanilla gorilla. You've got peanuts in your pocket to feed, vanilla gorilla. Vanilla gorilla, vanilla gorilla, vanilla gorilla, vanilla gorilla. You got peanuts in your pockets. You got peanuts in your pockets. Peanuts in your pocket.
LaunchLeft aims to create an intentional space that highlights and empowers all artists for whom radical creativity is not a choice, but a necessity. LaunchLeft begins with music, but its ultimate aim is to launch left-of-center artists in all creative fields.